Welcome to Read Your Comics. Today, I'm looking at Deathblow #1 from Image Comics. Before I dive in today, I want to say thank you to all the people that have started following me recently. I hope you're enjoying the channel. Be sure to spread the word and let's build that community. So last we left off with Darker Image #1 with this character. I'm not sure if this was meant to be part of Darker Image or not, because there's only 10 pages of Deathblow story in this book. Darker Image was meant to be a 4-issue miniseries. Only one issue ever came out, but it came out in like April, and this has a May cover date, if you can see it on this black cover. So I don't know if like they just decided, you know what, these characters are good enough to like stand on their own. I'm sure the Max already had its own planned series. Blood Wolf probably did, but Liefeld was just, stretching himself super thin at the time. So I don't know if maybe they just decided, you know what, let's just put out Deathblow #1. And it's actually like a flip book. Well, sort of a flip. It's got a flip cover, but it's not flipped inside, with this Cybernary #1 as well. So it makes me think that maybe this was meant to be Darker Image #2, and then they decided to just package it in a book and include the Cybernary story as well. Before we open it up, let's take a quick look at this cool cover. This kind of matte black, but it's got a little bit of a gloss to highlight Deathblow's face. We got some nice 90s foil embossed right here, the Image logo being foil and embossed as well. It's a pretty cool cover. The only thing I would critique about it pretty strongly is so many Image covers from this year have this. If you saw the reel I made, or the short on YouTube of the 1993 stack that I was just flipping through, I put all the black covers, particularly from Image, on top of each other, and it's like black cover, red foil, black cover, red foil, black cover with just a little black background with like a colored character, black background with, a silver character, black cover. I mean, it was a little ridiculous. I bet if you put them all up on the shelf at the same time, all you would see is like maybe the logos. Anyway, but it is a cool cover. I've always liked this cover. Let's see. Deathblow was the #9 selling book of the year. At least this #1 was. The second issue fell all the way into like the 130s, and there was only 2 issues that came out that year. From May until I think the second one came out in like November. Those were the only 2 issues, plus the Darker Image book, that came out in 1993. And then it wasn't until, I think it was like April of the next year that #3 came out, and #4 came out about two months after that, or 3 months after that. From my understanding, Jim Lee did the first 4 issues, and maybe that's why. And then it like kind of got more on a regular schedule after that. When I looked through it, it ran for I think 26 issues and a 0 issue. And after Jim Lee got off, it got on to at least getting 10 issues out a month. But those first 2 years, you got 4 issues, or like maybe 6 issues in the first 2 years. And the first 4 were the ones that were like so spread out. And that's part of the reason that like I kind of just fell off of Image, is that kind of routine and lateness. It's like by the time the next book came out, I'd forgotten what happened in this book. And as we go into this, you'll see there's really not a ton to remember anyway. It's beautifully drawn, but like story-wise, it's just kind of, it's okay. Just looking here, there's, we got Brandon Choi and Jim Lee, our co-creators in the story. Jim Lee is the artist. Joe Chiodo colors. Mike Heisler letters and logo. So we got the logo credited again to somebody. Wendy Fouts is color assist, production editor, blah, blah, blah. Chameleon on Prime is the color separator. So we're starting to get into, I guess that's some of the computer coloring. So here's our Deathblow story. He's in like a confessional. The story is called Confessions. And he kind of talks about how, he's done these horrible things to men, women, and children. This is a pretty awesome splash page, although it cracks me up. I've tried to tell, is it a bull? Is he riding the bull? Is he killing the bull? It's like there's blood splattering out of the bull. Is he riding the bull and it's stomping somebody? Like, what is going on in this picture? I've never quite understood exactly what's happening here. Kind of looks like he's riding it. Kind of looks like he's killing it. Awesome Jay Lee ad for the Wildcats trilogy miniseries. I'll be doing that soon. A lot of people look at this art and think that Jim Lee was trying to kind of imitate what Frank Miller was doing in Sin City at the time. And there is definitely some parallels with that. But Jim Lee cannot get away from all these little marks. And the color, too. It's like Frank Miller was doing everything in black and white. And that led to like that style being very defining of what Sin City is. But in this, again, it's like they can't get away from the color. And they make pretty good use of it by just doing these spot colors and these like just kind of like a one tone here and the yellow to make it come forward and stuff. It works, but I think saying it's copying Frank Miller is a bit overdone. This panel is pretty close to that. However, again, Jim Lee cannot get away from all these little marks. Just all of this stuff. I mean, Frank Miller did stuff like that, but not to this like degree. Pretty neat use of the screen here of the confessional booth. That looks hand-drawn to me, too. So the character here, he's talking about how he feels guilt and remorse for all the killing he has to do, and he wants to kill himself, but he doesn't have the strength to do that. He can kill anybody else, but not himself. This one's pretty Frank Miller-y looking. A little better as far as like the fabric folds and stuff. Looks really good. And there's like this gradient in the color there, or this gradient color in those folds, which I do find pretty interesting. Another Jim Lee, Brandon Choi book, Stormwatch 0. That's an awesome page. So as we go through, as we finish up this story, it turns out that the priest wasn't even in there listening to his confession. And when the priest comes in, he's like, "Oh, I didn't know you were in there. Is there something I can help you with?" And he just stares at him blankly. So either he didn't know the priest was there. I'm saying he knew the priest wasn't there because he didn't have the courage really to tell the priest really what was going on. Super cool shot of the cathedral. And this is where I think the color does work here. It's like you've just got this like little bit of pops of purple on the top there to kind of pull it out. And it does blend into some like gradient again into these like negative spaces. So basically he's leaving. He's like, "I've done all this killing and I'll probably do it again." This is a tabloid, but more important is this newspaper where it talks about Saddam Hussein not allowing U.S. inspectors in. This is 1993. This is very Sin City. Use the white as the negative space of the car. No real detail on the car at all. And that's the end of the Deathblow story. It's 10 pages. 10 whole pages. Always fun to look at this. It's funny how Image, as much as they were breaking away from Marvel, they still did stuff like a Marvel bullpen bulletins, like they call blah 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 #4. Other books coming out, Max #2. So we've had Darker Image came out, and the Max premiered at least the image premiere. And Max number 1 has already been out. So now we're looking at Max number 2. Spawn number 10, the Dave Sim issue. Here's Deathblow number 1, which you're just looking at. And there's a Wildcats trade paperback. 1993, trade paperbacks weren't a super common thing. They were coming out, but not like today where pretty much everything gets collected at least once. Back then it had to be like, for them to do that meant that they really believed in it, I guess. Because even the Spawns didn't get trade paperbacks until much later. So here's the Cybernary story, and this is by, what's his name? So, okay, flip it back around. So we've got Brandon Choi and Jim Lee are the co-plotters in story again. Steve Gerber doing the script. Nick Manbat, that's who I was wanting to say, does the art. So he's penciling and inking, I suppose. Joe Chiodo colors, kind of the same group here. Let's see if they credit the logo to anybody. They don't credit the logo to anybody, even though it's the same guy, Mike Heisler, doing the lettering on this as well. But nobody's credited with this logo. Nick Manbat. So I guess this is probably his property, although Jim Lee and Brandon Choi are getting story credit here. So kind of awkward. If you put this on the shelf like this, they should have made it an actual flip book, because it's like, that's a pretty good cover, especially for the time. You flip it open, and then the book's upside down, and you're on the last page. So flip it back around. Okay, it's my understanding Nick Manbat, I think, passed away from cancer not too long after this. Like, he didn't really get to reap the benefits of the 1993 explosion that a lot of people did, which is a sad story. So I remember the Cartoonist Kayfabe guys doing this book, and they loved this Cybernary book. I think they did their own video on Deathblow and another video on the Cybernary story. I think it's okay, but there's just not much there. And for Steve Gerber, you kind of expect, like, I guess a little bit more in general, but he was just more or less doing the dialogue. So I liked the art in this a lot, although I do think it gets a little muddy at points, especially the more I look at it. The story is there's some kind of, like, it's kind of a post-apocalyptic story on some island they call it Gomorrah. Kind of looks like it has a New York skyline. So I remember the Kayfabe guys really loving this story. They went on and on about the art. I think they did an episode on both the Deathblow and then a separate episode on just this Cybernary story. And I do like the art in it, especially looking back on it again a second time. I think it gets a little dark and muddy at places. Just the story, there's not much there. I felt like that. I was like, ooh, I want to keep going with this. You just have these, like, cybernetic, kind of monstrous looking dudes, and they're after another unit that they call her like a nymph bot, I think. Yeah, a nympho droid. So, she's like a sex bot that's gone rogue. It's not a news story. I feel like that's been done in all kinds of science fiction over the years. I guess she's kind of Red Sonja-ish. And that she's, wielding some weapons. She's got a sword and a gun and, like, metal bikini. But, I like the way this is drawn. I like this. It gets a little dark and muddy over here. That's pretty good. There's a lot of detail there, but again, things get lost, I feel like. The detail of the gun gets lost. Nice Union ad. Check out my Union video. This is a good splash page. But I do sit here and wonder, like, what is going on here? What is this stuff? Is this one of those guys in the foreground? Are these, like, monsters, like, or like cyber dogs or something coming at her? I'm not sure what's happening here. She looks great. That foreshortening of the gun barrel, like right at the reader's face. I mean, the position of her body is good and stuff. Nice silhouetting. Again, getting a little muddy. At least you can see the gunshots there. And there's some dialogue about how, like, these hunter-killer guys are supposed to be able to, track down anything, and they can't get one little sex bot. That's pretty awesome. And there he looks kind of like a cyber orc from Lord of the Rings or something. I thought that was interesting. She has like kind of an elf ear. There's a Sin City ad. So we can compare Sin City to Deathblow right in the same book. And it was getting a collection. Pretty cool here. She jumps up, slices dude's head. Looks good. That all looks good. Good use of color in this, the purple. I mean, it's like a dark, ominous. It gives you that purplish sky, pink purplish sky, kind of makes it feel like there's like chemicals in the air, or it's not just post-apocalyptic in the sense. It seems like this isn't a world where things have devolved from like a nuclear war and everything's just decimated. It seems like pollution and technology and the pollution that goes along with technology is kind of taken over and just, poisoned the atmosphere. Anyway, he has like a grenade and he's like, I'll blow it up and kill us both. And she was like, you'll blow yourself up. And she takes off, and I think she like jams it up in him somehow. He tells the other ones not to come close, and there's a nice explosion here and jumping off. And again, this is a good panel, and I could see this working like in an old like Daredevil comic, jumping off a pier with an explosion happening. But again, I feel like it just gets kind of muddy sometimes. I don't know if I've just complimented the color, but maybe it's the color that's making it look muddy. I feel like it's a heavy ink, though. This is, I guess she's like bouncing off of this, and you've got the sound effects and the debris falling, but you don't really, and her body's not, here her body's like kind of like backwards. So here it looks like she's going to jump off and roll with it. But then I think they could have done a better job here of like, showing like a tumble. Like maybe the first land was trying to be graceful, but it flipped her over or something. And she lands face down and is somewhat wounded, I guess. And this is creepy. I thought when I look back at this, I guess I didn't catch it on my first like look through kind of recently, but then right before I made the video and I flipped through, this is creepy. These like all of a sudden these like hatches open and these other creatures start coming up. And they apparently are wary of those hunter killers as well, so maybe they're hiding out. But they look eerie themselves. And they're like, we don't know what she is. Let's take her underground and find out. And she closes her eye and a tear drops. Even androids can cry. And that's the end of the Cybernary story. So, but this whole comic, both stories, this whole comic took less than 10 minutes to read. And that's even like reading kind of slow and absorbing the artwork. I've spent more time talking about it than I did reading it. And I think that was kind of like, something that defined Image and would eventually be the downfall of Image. And, Image had the higher price. This was a $2.50 book in 1993 when most books at the time were like $1.50. So you're paying an extra buck and you're just not getting as much out of it, in the sense that you got some good art, but the storyline, just nothing is there to captivate you. I think I got the second issue of Deathblow, but I did not get any further than that. Once there was another delay, and once the delays went into 1994, I was out on all of Image stuff, except for the Max I stuck with a little longer than most. But all the rest of them, I just, Spawn I stuck with up, until like 20. So maybe I was with Spawn until late 94, but definitely done with this, done with most of the Liefeld stuff, done with most of the Jim Lee stuff because of the delays. And this was definitely a victim of that. And surprisingly, Jim Lee did stick on for 4 issues. And I've seen them, and they are pretty to look at. And apparently Tim Sale took on the book after that for a bit, and then it still lasted 20-some issues. And I think when it got into a regular issue, Deathblow had enough of a following that there's even a Deathblow Wolverine crossover, and Deathblow crosses over with some other characters. And I don't know that DC's really done anything with Deathblow since they've had him. I don't know. So anyway, that's all I got for today. Till next time, read your comics.